Greetings, programs, and welcome to another episode of the Awesome Friday Podcast. My name is Matthew, and with me, as always, is Simon. Say hello, Simon.
Hi, and I'm literally with you today for the first time.
We are recording in the same physical space, and it's super weird.
Really?
After a dozen weeks of Zoom calls and, 2 years of Zoom calls, it's super weird.
It is a little weird, isn't it? I am finding the gentle transition of having to do things in person with people. I don't know about you, but I'm starting to find it way more difficult than I thought I would.
Yeah.
Because I work from home now, and I don't actually miss any kind of work socialization. So I was like, I'm fine. I won't notice this. But now I've started to do stuff with real people again in real places. It's actually, it feels really strange, and I don't like it for the most part. This is fine.
Yeah.
This is totally fine. But things like we went to see Back to the Future with the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra.
We did.
And I don't know about you, maybe it was just those horrific chairs, but that was a really weird, uncomfortable experience for me.
I mean, as a person who is near 6'5" tall, those chairs are just part of my experience. So, no. But there was definitely a lot of people.
It really was.
Which is weird, It's weird that we're even anywhere near close to being back to normal.
Yeah.
Given that in the past 7 days, I think there's been about 5,000 cases of COVID. But
I'm pretty sure that the focus has shifted from trying to stop it and trying to contain it to how we're going to deal with it happening. Like we're not going to see any more lockdowns. It's just not going to happen.
No, although you could, at least we're not Alberta, where they decided that it was over and now they're paying the price. But anyway.
True. It's very true.
So this week we are talking about two things, as per usual, and those two things could not be more different. It's a weird time, friends, because this week we are speaking about the Lego Star Wars Terrifying Tales special, currently on Disney Plus. Got added as of this recording yesterday, as of when you're listening to this 2 days ago. And also the new film, Titane? I don't know, it's French. I'm not 100% sure of the correct translation, but it's the super weird one that you've seen trailers for. That's taking the festival circuit by storm. It won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. It played TIFF. It played the opening of Beyond Fest just the other night. And film nerds are up in arms about this movie. And I saw it yesterday in a theater, and it's super weird and super dark.
So I'm quite excited about talking about this film because I've seen Lego Star Wars Terrifying Tales. I watched it yesterday, and I have a lot to say about it. But I haven't seen Titane. But based on your reaction, I cannot wait to start getting information out of you about this film, because all I've seen is a trailer and people's reactions that have seemed to be 50% enthralled and 50% horrified.
Yeah.
Pretty much at the same time. I can't wait to get into this because I've heard all kinds of things about it, and they can't all be true.
They're all true. Every single one of them is true. But let's start with the kid-friendly one. Let's start with the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special Terrifying Tales, which is a nice follow-up to last year's Lego Star Wars Holiday Special, which was a Christmas special. Clearly, the people who are doing Lego Star Wars really, really get Star Wars and why we love it, and I found this special to be very funny and very fun. So why don't you give us a quick rundown on the plot of this? Because
it's in the spirit of these Lego Star Wars specials. It is a masterful, not even a pastiche, but they take a tried and tested formula, which is we've broken down, and the only mansion within any distance is the spooky mansion. Let's go in and see what's inside. And so this follows that, and Poe has a slight TIE fighter incident and crashes on Mustafar, where he finds Darth Vader's castle. Darth Vader's castle, which is currently has been bought and is being turned into a hotel by a relative of Jabba the Hutt, who, one of my favourite bits, I'm just going to cut straight to it, where they discover a secret wing, is when he goes in and goes, "Look at the space! We can make a business centre!" And here's the thing about Lego Star Wars, right? Before you tune out and assume it's just for kids, the the root of Star Wars has had tons of very quick comedic elements. And the success of Lego Star Wars is really down to Traveller's Tales, really, the game developers who made the Lego Star Wars games. And when they made the Lego Star Wars games, because they were very, very aimed at kids, but they wanted the kids to play with the adults. So the humour in those games is obvious enough for kids to get it, but with tons and tons of references for adults, because they wanted families to play together. So what's happened now, thanks to the success of those games, the specials and all the Lego Star Wars has that same mix of very almost what do you call it, like physical, lots of physical humor, but mixed with tons and tons of references that only adults who know their movies and know their Star Wars movies and all their different genre movies will get. And they come fast and they come quick and they all land. Like, you're right, what you said earlier, it's very, very clearly made by someone who knows and loves Star Wars. Like, it's a total passion project.
I think what I like about it is that it really nails the same energy that Star Trek Lower Decks does for me.
Ooh.
In that it's clearly made, it's making fun with Star Wars, not of it. But it's clearly like laughing at some of the more ridiculous shit in Star Wars.
Absolutely. The when Poe gets to the castle, it's being somewhat held on to by one of Darth Vader's old butlers. Like, if you've seen Rogue One, for example, you've seen the men he has looking after him, Mustafa, who run him a nice bath at one point. And it's very, very clear that this helper is waiting for the Empire to return to their full power, because this is set after Rise of Skywalker. So the First Order are done, the Empire's long gone, and the last remnants are kind of hanging on. And this very overly dramatic, hammy waiter to Darth Vader, whenever they come across a new room, like they find some Sith lightsabers or they find a holocron which gives you wishes, he tells them, this is very much like the Wookiees' paw. And so each room or beat of the story has a cutaway standalone story with a very typical sort of Hammer horror kind of structure where something goes wrong, like Twilight Zone, like be careful what you wish for kind of thing. There's always a message. And then, of course, they all combine, and the true villain is revealed, and it's not shocking at all. But how it's done is fantastic. And honestly, if you get past the point of thinking, oh, this is just a kids' movie, this is some of the best Star Wars that we've seen in a long time. In particular, I don't know how you felt, but there's one wonderful side story where they tell the story of the Knights of Ren, but as the Lost Boys. And the leader of the Knights of Ren is basically Kiefer Sutherland with his hair slicked back. And
played by Christian Slater.
Is that who you were talking about? Is that Christian Slater? And it's very, very well done. But this, in the Star Wars movies, the Knights of Ren are kind of just turn up and then fight for a bit and then disappear.
The Knights of Ren in the movies are, I liken them to Boba Fett in the originals in that they are just suits of armor.
Yeah.
There's nothing to them.
And
I know that lots of people love Boba Fett, but tell me anything cool or useful that he did in any movie up until the second season of The Mandalorian, basically. Yeah. Like, nothing. He didn't do anything. I'm sorry. Anyway,
you feel very strongly about Boba Fett.
I do.
But there's the part of the Knights of Ren here, we learn about them as being these extremely force-sensitive young men who are neither Jedi nor Sith. They reject all of it and they just want to use their powers for, like, accumulation of whatever that might be.
Yeah, just to take what they want.
Yeah, like a roving band of this middle ground. And it's really interesting that this middle ground keeps getting explored, of the legend in the whole saga about the balance of the Force. There's so much evidence for that. In the original episode 9, it was meant to be Rey as neither Jedi nor Sith, as this balance of good and bad that represents all of us being good and bad. And this is another example of that. Like, they were neither the goodies or the baddies. They were just this middle ground. And we find out how, I don't know if this is canon, but we find out how Kylo Ren got his name. It was like a jibe at him. It was one of their language. Kylo means like weakling. And he sort of possesses this word and takes it on.
Yeah, I don't know if these are canon, but I mean, the Christmas special last year had Rey teaching Finn the ways of the Force and how to use a lightsaber, so I hope so.
I hope so too. But the whole thing is so sparky and so dynamic, and honestly it's more entertaining than the last movie anyway.
Yeah, and there's it's an anthology of 3 shorts with this frame story around them. And all 3 of the shorts are good. I would say the Knights of Ren one is probably the best one. There's also a Twilight Zone E1 where in the story Luke Skywalker gets recruited into the Imperial Navy rather than the Resistance. That's quite interesting.
Oh, that is a really good one. It's a very What If style, isn't it?
Yeah, very Twilight Zone-y. And the whole thing is just fun and funny, and it's exactly what I want from a 45-minute Disney special, basically. And I hope they do more of them. Because again, like, I don't know if you've played the Lego Star Wars video games, but they also really get Star Wars.
They really do.
In the ways that I want them to get Star Wars.
They're really, really good games. My favourite part of the whole thing, actually, was bless the battle droids from the original trilogy. The battle droids, whoever is in charge of them, like Clone Wars and the Lego stuff now, have realised that these battle droids are comedy gold, because they're kind of they're the worker bees, but they moan about everything. They've turned them into these like snidey, moany things. But in this one, they are like zombie analogs. The Poe wakes up a load of them, and their programming isn't finished or whatever, so they walk around like zombies. And at one point, one of them breaks through a door with an axe and sticks his head through and says, "Here's E 1 3 3 4 5 6 1."
Forgot about that.
It's just so good. Oh my god! And of course, the kids think it's funny, but the adults get it. Like, there's lots of moments like that, and I don't know. I want more of them. I wish they happen more often. Honestly, I think
you should be watching Lower Decks.
I should be really.
I feel like Lower Decks might be kind of not wasted on you, but definitely there's going to be some deep cut references that you're going to miss because you're not a Star Trek guy. But like, it's the same energy in a lot of ways.
More than once, I've looked at my Crave subscription and gone, I should just watch Star Trek, like all of Star Trek.
Yes,
and then I'd be ready to watch Lower Decks. I'd probably get it.
You should. I mean, I fundamentally back this plan.
We did talk about that once. What was our podcast special name? What was it? Between a Spock and a Picard place?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So good.
We were gonna watch all of Star Trek and podcast it, but it seems like maybe too big of a project.
I think that sounds like us. Yeah.
Because that plan was to watch literally all of it in chronological release order, and that's just a lot. There's 700 plus episodes of Star Trek TV.
I wonder if anyone's done the maths on that.
Not to mention 13 movies. So, yeah.
I wonder, someone must have crunched the numbers. Like, how long would it take to watch the entirety of Trek? Like, all the
I
Trek?
don't know, but I guarantee somebody's done that math.
And you've seen all of them like 2 or 3 times, right?
I mean, through the course of my life, yes. Not like all at once back to back, but I've definitely seen all of Star Trek. I think the only Star Trek I haven't seen multiple times at this point would be the most recent stuff. So I watched season 1 of Lower Decks twice, 2 or 3 times depending on the episode.
So you're not really into Discovery?
No, I really like Discovery, but that's a much bigger commitment, right? Mm-hmm. It's very easy to throw on a 22-minute episode of TV than a 55-minute episode of TV.
Yeah, that's true.
And as much as Lower Decks does have some very minor ongoing continuity, like Discovery tells season-long stories, so it's kind of hard to just throw on, a middle episode of a season. Plus, the first season's not great, and the third season's good. The second season's the best, in my opinion, so far. And I haven't watched Picard more than once either, but...
Oh, did you like it?
Yeah, that was fine. Okay. That was fine. It's definitely at least different than what I expected it to be, which is honestly all I want from Star Trek is for them to, do more different stuff. Same thing I want from Star Wars. I want them to do more different stuff.
Okay.
And Picard is maybe a little bit on the fan servicey side for my taste, but still new and interesting and different enough that it was still good. So, anyway, that's very much like Star Wars Lego Holiday Special.
Every time we talk about Star Wars, we end up talking about Trek. I wonder why. But I think I perhaps preferred the Christmas one a bit more. I think it played a little more fast and loose with its story beats, and it had time travel in it, and it was really audacious with how it threw together different story elements. And
it was also like a time-skipping adventure through the greatest hits of Star Wars, whereas this was a little more original, at least in terms of the 3 anthology shorts. So fan service is maybe the wrong word, but definitely like hitting those highlights didn't work against it anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but I think I mean it's still they're both good. They're both fun. They're both funny, and I recommend them both. You should
definitely watch them.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So, shall we move on to Titane?
Yeah. Well, so we're gonna have to talk about this in 2 segments, where I will tell you everything I feel like I can tell you about this movie without giving you spoilers. And then we'll do a quick interlude where we do all the support stuff and all the taglines, and then we'll talk about spoilers, because if I tell you the plot of this movie, you straight up won't believe me. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot of film, folks, and it's definitely one you should see in theaters if you can. It's a lot, and it's a lot for your senses, and there's a lot on screen happening, and I'm going to stick with a lot. That's the word. That's the phrase I'm using. It's a lot.
Well, let's begin with our spoiler-free section. So,
yes.
How would you summarize the main plot of this movie without spoiling it?
I have no fucking idea.
Like, what's the main thing that happens?
Yeah. So it's impossible to tell you any of the plot without at least some amount of spoilers. But effectively, the first half of the film concerns a young woman named Alexia, who is a sociopath or a psychopath and an exotic dancer or showgirl. Her main area of work seems to be that she is a dancer at a car show, or a stripper, an adult entertainer at a car show where she grinds on a car, much to the delight of men who are there to look at the, quote, cars. And in the earliest scenes of the movie, she does a performance, which is pretty electric, to be fair. And then as she's leaving, there's a fan who follows her to her car and basically says, "Oh no, I know you don't feel the same, but I love you, and maybe we could be friends." And she's obviously like, "Get the fuck away from me," as any woman would be. And then he sort of forces his way into her car and starts kissing her, and at first she resists, and then she sort of starts getting what seems to be a little bit into it, and then just when his guard comes down, she takes out her steel hairpin, and it ends up in his ear. And he is very dead after several seconds of convulsing. It's a pretty upsetting scene, to be honest, in a lot of ways. And yeah, so the whole first half of this movie is Alexia, the serial killer. You learn pretty quickly the next day that there's a serial killer terrorizing the South, which is obviously her. But her parents, who don't seem that interested in her, who she still lives with, don't seem to care. And eventually, she gets into a situation where she commits a multiple homicide, which is both incredibly gruesome and mildly hilarious. And she has to go on the run from the police, and to do so she changes her appearance and sets herself up as this child who went missing 10 years ago and ingratiates herself with that child's father. And the rest of the film is about this weird found family where she is the long lost son of this old, emotionally damaged firefighter.
So did you say son?
Yeah. Yeah. Did I not mention this movie was a lot?
Right.
What's really interesting about this movie is that it shouldn't work. Like, it really shouldn't work. But there's no part of this movie that would work without the other parts. And I'm not even saying even a fifth of the ridiculous, over-the-top, absurd, sleazy shit that happens in this movie. But none of it would work if it wasn't all there, I don't think. Which is quite a feat, really. And I don't know if you've seen it, but the director, Julia Ducournau, I believe is how you pronounce her name. Her previous feature is one called Raw, which is about a young woman who, as she goes to college, discovers a taste for human flesh.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Which is also a very good...
I keep meaning to watch that.
Like, family-oriented body horror. Like, this is where this director seems to live. Family-oriented, like... Not like family-friendly, but like stories oriented around family with body horror elements. And they're both amazing, and you should definitely see them both. And Titane is playing in theaters right now, and if it's safe to go to a theater where you are, you should go do that. I don't know how to summarize it further, man.
Why do I feel like you're holding back?
Because I am. I literally just told you I'm holding
back.
Yeah,
I know. Oh, that's why I feel that. Okay.
Yeah. Because there's so much. There's so much. There's so much going on in this movie, and you should really see it as cold as you can. Just be prepared for the subtitles. Be prepared for 2 really great performances. Be prepared to see some weird, absurd shit, and to see something that is at the same time really fucking disturbing, but also really weirdly sentimental and touching at the same time. The movie's a lot. That's what I'm trying to say. But I definitely recommend it. I don't know, like, there's a lot of people saying this is like the film of the year, and it did again win the Palme d'Or at Cannes, and it won the Audience Award at Midnight Madness at TIFF. And there's a fairly good chance it's going to be nominated for some other awards down the line. I don't know that it's the 5-star movie that everyone told me it was, but it's definitely a 4-star movie. It's definitely one of the better films of the year. Maybe not the best of the year, but definitely one of the most unforgettable cinematic experiences you'll have, assuming you go see it.
Is it good?
Yes. It's also... it's so, like, audacious and so singular in its vision and execution and cinematography and performances that you, even if it were a bad movie, which it's not, you would be forced to admire it for how much care and everything is put into it. Like, it might be the best thing you've ever seen, it might be the worst thing you've ever seen, but in either case, you would admire it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you can admire the art.
And it's like, to be fair, like, it's not going to be for everyone. There's definitely a lot that is, I feel, purposefully vague. And a lot of, like, metaphor and a lot left up to interpretation. But at the same time, again, so singular and so focused and so well performed and so absurd that once you're bought in, you'll be 100% in and you will admire it, I feel. But it definitely might be too absurd for some people. Like, it's, you know, I don't know how to... There's nothing I can say now that wouldn't be a spoiler, but it's definitely, no matter what I say about it, it's definitely one of those films you should see and decide for yourself.
In the trailer, it describes it as simultaneously either a touching story of love or the most repulsive thing you've ever seen. Where do you fall on that binary?
Repulsive is probably too strong of a word, but it's both. It's both of those things.
Right.
And again, I don't think it would be as successful as it is without being both of those things. Because one thing informs and juxtaposes the other at the same time, which is weird, but it works.
Would you watch it again?
I will definitely watch it again, just to I think it'll be a film that rewards multiple viewings. Again, your mileage may vary on this. It's definitely not for everyone. And to be fair, I don't know if I would have liked it as much if I saw it at home, which is about as much of an endorsement for the return to theaters as I can muster at this point.
Why is that? Because the immersion or the cinematography, or what would you have missed out by watching it here? Apart from the obvious, the screen size, is there anything?
Just the immersion. Even I'm pretty good about not doing other things while watching films at home, but the theater lends level of focus that you'll just never have at home.
Sure.
And I feel like that's important. And also, it is a gorgeously shot movie.
Mm-hmm.
The cinematographer's name, who I have now forgotten, because that's my MO when it comes to these things, and the director clearly had a vision of what they wanted to have on screen. And there's some absolutely gorgeous imagery, especially one early sequence, which is the first scene of the movie is a long, slow pan through the engine of a car, the running engine of a car, with condensation and oil dripping and things vibrating, almost sensual look at the engine of a car. And there's another couple of shots where there's some fire in the background that are absolutely stunning. The cinematographer's name is Ruben Ipon. Ipens. Someone French correct me.
Sure.
He's Belgian, apparently. But yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful movie. And it's, whether you love it or hate it, you'll never forget it. Which I think is a good thing.
I think we need to get into spoiler territory. So we should, if you're leaving today, come back, go and see. If you're going to see Titane, if you don't want to know what we're going to get into now, have a look at the timestamp and come back, because I've got so many questions I'm going to ask Matt about this film.
Yeah.
And we're going to reveal more about it. So before you go, this message.
So obviously we would like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for your listenership and support. And if you would like to give us a hand, please feel free to, or be encouraged to, give us a like, a subscribe, or a review on your podcasting platform of choice. If you'd like to help us a little more directly, we do also have Patreon, a Ko-fi, and PayPal, and you can find all of those on the site at awesomefriday.ca /podcast. But now we are going to talk spoilers.
Yes. Spoilers for Titane.
And you should definitely go into this movie cold. You shouldn't have any of this stuff spoiled. So if you haven't seen it, definitely go away and pause this and come back later and see if you have all the same questions that Simon, who hasn't seen it, is going to ask me. And we're going to do that in 3, 2, 1, go.
Bye. Okay. So, as you were talking, I read the plot synopsis on Wikipedia, and I've got one really simple question for you.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
So, you've cherry picked some key points here, and you've omitted just a few tiny things.
Yeah.
So, tell me about the car.
Okay, so a more complete plot synopsis of this film is that the first scene of the movie, we meet a preteen Alexia, and you can tell from and I said this in my review if you read it, you can tell immediately that even at that young age, she is someone who, I don't know if sociopath is the right word, but they're on a drive, and she's mimicking the car engine revving, which is annoying her father, and she's kicking the back of his seat, and eventually she's not wearing a seatbelt, and she basically causes an accident, which results in her having a titanium plate in her head. Fast forward, she's a stripper, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward, she kills the first guy you see, and she returns to the venue because the guy has, drooled all over her in his throes of death. And as she's showering it, she hears this knocking, this pounding on a door, and she walks through the door out onto the showroom, and there's this Cadillac, the same Cadillac she danced upon earlier in the film. And she gets into the back seat, and the hydraulics start pumping, and she climaxes in the back seat of the car. And not that much later, although after some other events, we find out that she is pregnant.
So she had sex with a car?
She had sex with the car.
Okay.
Yeah, she had sex with the car and got pregnant.
And it's implied that the baby is the car's baby?
That's not implied. That's the plot of the movie.
Right. Does she know that from the beginning?
So she starts menstruating motor oil. So yes. I think she knows what's going on pretty early. She also has this flirtation with another stripper at the club whose name is Justine, actually played by the young woman who played Justine in Raw, the main character in Raw. And basically, once they finally get back to Justine's place, Justine gets murdered, but then Justine has 3 roommates, which Alexia doesn't realize at first. And there's that extended multiple murder scene I mentioned, which is both incredibly brutal and also darkly hilarious.
Mm-hmm. What makes it funny? Where's the humor?
The funniest part of the whole thing, so she kills Justine, and her roommate comes downstairs and is like, hey, what's going on here? And she beats the shit out of him, and while another roommate watches, and eventually he's winning, but she manages to knock him on his back, and she kills him with a stool, like a bar stool.
Mm-hmm.
And she manages to get it onto his face, and it goes through his face to the floor, and then in a moment of exhaustion she sits on the stool. It's really fun. Like, it's a really dark moment.
Did you see this in a full theatre?
I saw it in a theater with a number of other press people. It was maybe 10 people.
And was there any kind of group reaction to this?
Honestly, we were too separated for me to tell.
Right.
But that's not the end of the scene.
Oh, okay.
So she goes upstairs and she's knocking on the door. There's another roommate, a woman, who's seen this murder. And she goes upstairs and she starts like knocking on the door to be like, I'm coming to get you, or whatever. And then another roommate shows up and he's like, hey, what's going on? And she just looks so like, ugh, how many fucking people are in this house? So she murders that guy. She ends up leaving, but the woman is alive. So now she's on the run. And while she's on the run, she keeps seeing these advertisements for the anniversary of the disappearance of this young boy named Adrian, who disappeared when he was like 7, and now he would have been 17. And she goes into a bathroom and she cuts off her blonde hair and dyes it brown. She breaks her own nose on the side of a sink. And she goes to the police and says, hi, I'm Adrian. And then Vincent, Adrian's father, comes and they show her to him and he's like, that's my son. And they're like, do you want to do a DNA test? And he's like, no, I recognize my son. And he takes her home. And Vincent, played by a guy named Vincent Lindon, is a pretty incredible performance by Mr. Lindon. He's the obviously past his prime fire chief. He's a muscle-bound alpha male who is emotionally broken and just desperate for some kind of connection, catharsis, and closure from his child disappearing. And the second half of this movie becomes this weird found family thing between the two of them, where they come to love and care for one another. And like, he doesn't know that she's not his son, but he clearly doesn't. You reach a point where you're like, oh, he doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
He just needs that connection.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, she's getting more and more pregnant with a car baby. But she gets away from this by like taping down her breasts and taping down her pregnant belly to make herself look more masculine. And by the time you get to the last thing of this movie, which will be the one that we all talk about, where she gives birth to this car baby.
Is it a car? Like, does she give birth to a tiny car?
No, she gives birth to a tiny human with a titanium spine.
So it's like a hybrid.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But I guess to completely spoil the ending, she gives birth, she dies in childbirth because the baby basically, like, she gets ripped apart. giving. You don't really see that, but it's a mess of torn flesh and motor oil, and then
God.
Vincent is snuggling, like comforting the child as she lies dead on the bed of his apartment, and then he's saying, "Don't worry, I'll be here for you." That cuts to black.
Jesus Christ.
I think you fully comprehended when I said that this movie was
Jesus
a lot.
Christ.
Like, a lot.
What's your feeling at the end of this film? Was it satisfying? Like, did you feel anything at the end of this film?
I mean, I left the theater and I think the first thing I did was text you with the words, "Holy fucking shit." The movie is it's a little bit overwhelming, to be totally honest. It's weird and absurd and disgusting and sleazy and violent and gory and weirdly heartfelt. Like, by the time you get to the point where Vincent basically admits he knows that she's not her son, you're like, the whole found family thing is a really interesting angle for them to have been taking on this whole film.
This is a French film, right?
Yes.
Right. French films do that, though, don't they? They often have this really weird contrast of touching and murderous.
I mean, you can get that from anywhere, but this particular one is so delicately but purposefully balanced between those things that, again, I don't know if any one part of this film would be successful. I don't know if it'd be successful without any one part. Even the parts that feel like they might be too much. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's a balance, isn't it? So from a director point of view, is this based on this film and the last film? Do you feel like this director is really, like, singular among directors at the moment? Is this the kind of thing you've ever seen before?
I think she's a mad genius. I think that she's the type of director that if you're a film nerd, you will hear her name at an upcoming festival and you'll be like, that's the movie I want to see.
Oh, okay.
Because whether or not this movie works for you and whether or not Raw worked for you, they are both very singular, very focused, very well constructed works, with pretty overt themes of family and found love, and I mean, yeah, I don't need, it's hard to even think about this movie because so much is going on in it.
And this is only that director's second film?
Second feature, anyway. I think she had some shorts and such, like anyone would, ahead of that.
Right.
But this is only her second feature, yes. And again, like, it's beautifully shot. The scene of her early on walking from the shower to the car is gorgeous, and I think part of that too is that it never at any point really feels, even when she's, exotic dancing and grinding on the car at the beginning, it never really feels leery. Like, it never feels like it's leering at her. It's definitely, it's sexualized, but it doesn't feel gross. Like it very easily could. If that makes sense.
It does, yeah, and I think female directors filming stuff like that manage to find a very different way of getting it so it's not purely sexual.
Yeah, and I mean, at the same time, Alexia is a serial killer. And when she kills Justine, it's a little bit out of the blue. It's clearly because she doesn't actually really know how to connect with people. But the first time she kills someone, you're like, yeah, I think I was a douchebag. Like,
yeah, they're coming.
Like, that's a bit rapey, dude. Like, maybe you shouldn't be surprised that you have a metal spike in your ear now. But there's also, like, right before she goes on the run, she's trying to burn the evidence of her killing Justine and Justine's roommates, and she sets the house on fire, and she locks her parents in. As if to further illustrate their icy relationship.
Well, that did it.
So
she's unhinged. The main character in this is completely... There's almost no relatable elements. Like, do you find yourself sympathizing with her at all?
In the second half, a little bit, yeah. Because again, like, the second half of this found family story where she finds in Vincent this father figure who, despite his controlling nature and over the top, because he's again a fire captain, so his life is very regimented and very rigid. But for the first time, and again, it's open to interpretation, and some of it's left pretty deliberately vague, I would say, but it feels like really the first time she's ever been, even though she's masquerading as someone else, it feels like the first time she's ever legitimately been cared for by anyone. And without the first half of the film, that wouldn't land. If that makes sense. I think it does. And the first half wouldn't be so... If the first half even just wasn't as over the top as it is, I don't think the second half would be as affecting as it is. And, Vincent is a pretty pity-worthy character as well. He's obviously an emotionally broken man. He's desperate for connection. His wife has left him in the wake of their son disappearing. The wife actually finds out who Alexia is well before he does, but she keeps the secret to maintain his delusion because she knows it would break him, basically.
Right. When does the father find out?
You get the impression that he sort of knows. It's all towards the end, but there's definitely a scene where that could be read either way, where he says, I don't care who you are, you're my son. And that could be him saying it because they're just not connecting, or it could be him saying it because he knows she's not his son.
Right.
And then later in the film, there's a very similar scene where she's just got out of the shower and her towel falls down and he sees her breasts and he just puts the towel back on her.
Oh, okay.
So one of those two scenes.
Yeah.
I think it's the former, personally, where he's so desperate for connection, and both ways, he's desperate for, not only to care for someone, but to be cared for himself, and it's all very fucked up but touching.
Huh. Sounds intriguing.
We're gonna be unpacking this movie for years. For years. It's audacious, and again, it's absurd, and it's weird, and I think there's some flow issues at the beginning where I feel like it jumps around maybe a little bit too much, a little too quickly. There doesn't have a lot of room to breathe, but all this is very nitpicky. It's a great film. And even if you hate it, it's going to be a movie that you will want to talk about for a long time. So, yeah, that's Titane.
Wow.
Titane.
I have no idea if I want to see this film.
I think you should. I'm always on team. You should see it for yourself. This is definitely a movie where I'm on team. You should see this for yourself. Love it or hate it. It's it's an experiential recommendation.
So that's a high praise indeed.
Yeah, it's again, love it or hate it, you'll never forget it. It's and it's. Even if you just remember some of the imagery, like her lactating or menstruating motor oil, or, scratching her swollen pregnant belly to find, a metal sub-skin underneath her own skin. At one point she's scratching her belly and she rips her skin open and there's, a metal womb underneath.
What?
But again, it's so absurd and over the top. If it wasn't as absurd or as over the top, I don't think it would work.
It sounds like it's one of these things that's, because it's all in, everyone's all in on it.
Oh, it's 100% committed in every way.
Yeah.
And
it would have to be, wouldn't it? I think.
And again, if it wasn't, I don't think it would work.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say.
What did you give it on Letterboxd?
4 out of 5.
Okay.
4 out of 5. I didn't think it was the revelation that lots of other people have told me that it is. But it's definitely one of the better films of the year. And if I was still giving out half-star ratings, it probably would have been a 4.5. But again, you should see the movie. See the movie, people. See the movie. It's it's one for the ages. But not for all ages. Don't take your kids to see this movie.
God, don't take some of your adults to see this movie. I'm going to take my wife to see this movie just to then watch her face instead of the movie, just to see her reaction.
Yeah. That would be...
I think that might break her forever.
Yeah. This is the kind of movie where I honestly don't know what my wife's reaction would be. At all. Which is saying a lot, so usually I have a pretty good gauge of what that's going to be, but with this movie I have no idea.
What's the genre of this movie?
Horror.
Because on Wikipedia the critic describes her films as gothic body horror.
A body horror for sure. Like, her first film is about a young emergent cannibal. And this movie is about a woman who's pregnant with the baby of a Cadillac. Like, it's body horror.
Actually, I got it wrong. It's gothic horror heroism. Heroinism. So, would you describe the girl as a heroine?
Would I describe the serial killer as a heroine?
Yes.
No. I would describe her as an unloved person who doesn't know how to relate. Which, to some extent, Raw is about that as well, right? Like, Raw is it's basically about the changes you go through when you come of age and go to school and do that stuff. It just also happens to be coupled with this particular character developing a ravenous taste for human flesh. As teenagers do.
Mm-hmm. Of course. All of them.
All of them. Yeah.
Good. Okay, so that's Titane.
Yeah.
Recommended by the sound of it.
Yeah, I mean, again, you should definitely see this movie. Mm-hmm. It's an experiential recommendation.
So, what are we going to look at next week? Do you know what we should do next week? We should both go and watch Dear Evan Hansen.
No.
Because what I'm hearing about that film, it sounds like Cats level special.
So, honestly, if it were a slower time of year, I'd be down with that plan. But I'm finishing up my coverage of Fantastic Fest, and the Vancouver International Film Festival started yesterday. And next week is James Bond, and 2 weeks after that is Dune.
What about Venom? You got any room for Venom in your life?
Yeah, that came out yesterday as of this recording, and it sounds bad in the way that is right up my alley.
I've heard good things.
I've heard both. I've heard both ways, but like I say, it sounds like it's bad in the ways that appeal to me.
Yeah.
So hopefully it is, but I don't know what we're gonna cover next week. What did I have on the short list?
Muppets Haunted Mansion.
Yes, that comes out. We can
definitely talk about
next week. We're not allowed to talk any further about it.
The wonderfully titled "There's Someone Inside Your House."
Yes, which I've actually already seen because it was part of Fantastic Fest.
Oh, okay.
But it'll be on Netflix next week, so we can talk about that too. And then in 2 weeks' time, we'll probably do our VIF wrap-up episode.
Yeah, I've started watching a movie called Time on VIF, which I hope to review soon.
Yeah, and I've seen 3 or 4 now. 3, I think.
Excellent.
4. So.
Good.
Yeah. Good, well, I think we'll call it there for an evening. That's quite subdued for being in person, I thought. It's just because this movie is so much.
Yes.
Like, it's...
I did like how we bounced from Star Wars to autoerotica, quite literally autoerotica.
Yeah. I thought the movie's a lot. It's overwhelming just to think about.
Well, thank you for listening.
Yes.
Once again, please go and do the thing where you subscribe and like and do the Patreon, and what else can they do?
No, those are the main things. We should also, we just had Canada's first ever Day for Truth and Reconciliation, so we should probably acknowledge that we live and record this on the traditional unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We also have theme music from our friend Mark, who no longer lives in Canada, and all the website graphics were done by our friend Matt, who lives in New York. And we'll link them up in the show notes because they both do music and art for a living.
We have some very talented friends.
Yeah, more so than us, for sure. But yeah, that's all I got for now. So we'll cut it there. Everyone have a lovely week, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.